My name is Heather. I work alongside Ian and Kartik. Ian wears many hats, but today he will be mainly teaching us about metadata and tagging in SharePoint. I'll go ahead and pass it over.
Before I jump into the subject, I want to share this nice picture of us in Hamburg. So shows a little bit of who we are as a company. We're a small company, but we really enjoy working together in serving all of our clients and give the best service. So yeah, this was a nice time that we had together in Hamburg, cooking some stuff together. And yeah, here you can see a little bit of the history of the company. It was started by Claudius and Kartik here in the picture. Kartik is here on the call. You can see it here, the second one right there in the picture. At the bottom in the picture, you can see in blue is Claudius, and they met while working at Bain. And yeah, we've been in business for over 10 years now. So before starting with metadata or metadata in SharePoint, I want to break this into two separate subjects and before jumping into like the real thing on how to use metadata in SharePoint. The first thing is knowing what is metadata. Metadata basically summarize basic information about data assets or content that we have in our content systems, and it makes us find and work with particular data in an easier way. In this case, I think a nice way to call it are kind of like properties of the files or data sets that we have in SharePoint. If you see here on the right, you'll see in the TeamSlide add-in, you will click on see information for a slide. You will see the information, you will see all those properties and description. Those are kind of like metadata associated to a specific slide. But in this case, you can also have metadata associated with files in SharePoint, and that's what we're going to do. Some examples are like date created, author, tags, description, general media type, and so more. So why is metadata that important? Help us give context to specific data sets, and it also helps users to find the data and sort it out in the content system. With this long repositories that we have, is easier to use metadata or use tags or properties to just filter the data and try to find the one piece of data that we need. And of course, it enforces the uniformity in our content system. How we can find this metadata in SharePoint? In SharePoint, we have columns. So when you go into your SharePoint instance and you go to a library or to a folder, you will find this different columns. So if we see the ones on the left side here in this example, modify and modified by, these are kind of standard columns that come in SharePoint and that basically apply to all the files that we have in SharePoint. But we can also set up some custom columns like industry, quality. We can have, I don't know, vertical, like many different custom data sets that we can apply to files that we have in SharePoint. The ones on the left are kind of global columns that basically define metadata that can be reused along all the different sites or subsites that you have. So you can set up this kind of global columns that apply to all the SharePoint instance, and then it will replicate in all the subsites that are created below and all the folders and all the rest of the components of the SharePoint structure. And we can also have kind of local columns that apply to specific libraries or lists of content that we have in different sites or subsites in SharePoint. So we want to show you an example of how this looks in SharePoint.
So TeamSlide connects to SharePoint, as most of you on the call know. Rather than reinventing the wheel and having you upload content directly to TeamSlide, we made this architectural choice early on to sync with your content systems and keep that as your single source of truth. And in doing so, we wanted to make sure that we can absorb everything from your content systems, all that investment that you placed in there, including metadata, and pull them in here. That decision, I think, is paying off now, especially in the world of AI, as you have more and more tools that are context hungry, information hungry, having it centralized in SharePoint on other CMS. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And then tools like TeamSlide can then sync and grab what they need. So here's my SharePoint setup. I guess I'll walk through a few things. First off, as Ian pointed out, you have your SharePoint address up here. Our company name is Aploris. TeamSlide is our primary product. That's why it says aploris.sharepoint.com. And then yours might say sites/marketing. In our case, it just says TeamSlide content. I think that's because it's a broader list of sites. And then within that, we're looking at documents. That's the library is where you house all your information in your document library. Our document library, like yours, will have multiple folders. And I'll jump into an example one, automotive. And here you can see the file names. You can see standard metadata that's in SharePoint modified by modified date, folder, file name. But then you can add custom columns. We have industry, service line, and quality set up. But you can add a custom column by clicking on add column. And you can select the type of column that you like. Typically it's choice or maybe text. And you can call this department. And then you can set up, your department choices. So once that's set up, you can now assign your files to a different department. Here, so if I click in, I typically like going to edit in grid view. Let me see if I can find that. It's right in here. And now I can pick sales. Maybe this is marketing. And then I can say save, and it'll save those values. And then those can be used inside TeamSlide. Once you set up the columns in SharePoint, we have to map them into TeamSlide. So in TeamSlide, and this part we can help with is if you're mapping new columns, feel free to reach out at any point. But in TeamSlide, if you come over to the properties and tags section, this is where you'll see all the metadata, and this is where you can link the metadata in TeamSlide to SharePoint. So you see I have industry, quality, service line, but I also have some standard metadata like file name, folder, path. And so for every piece of metadata like file name, it's mapped to the value source of file name, mapped to file name, and I can decide how I want to use it. I don't want to browse by file name. Seems like I might have too many files for that, but I do want to be able to filter searches by file name. And so that's why this is turned on. But for custom columns like quality, again, you can set up the values here. What type of property is it's a list value or a choice value? Do we want to accept multiple values or just one? And how do we want to use it? Do we want to search by that value? If I search for marketing, I don't want all of those slides to show up. So I'm going to turn that off. I only have 3 or 4 departments, so I don't want to browse by it because it'll be just too many files, too many slides, but I do want to filter. So just depending on the type of property you have, you can configure this here and set it up. And then lastly, we have to tie the property from SharePoint into TeamSlide, and that's where this is done, where you can map the name in SharePoint to TeamSlide, and then it syncs and you're off and running. So I know that was a lot. I will definitely answer questions, so feel free to type that in, but Ian, maybe I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, before jumping into the questions, I think it's important to say that what we showed right here is how to use the metadata coming from SharePoint, which is not mandatory. It's great to have, and we can absorb that metadata that you have. If you currently have metadata in SharePoint, we can absorb it. But there's also the option to use TeamSlide to tag slides and kind of use metadata inside TeamSlide. And the difference between using the SharePoint metadata is that metadata in SharePoint, when TeamSlide absorbs it, it basically marks or adds these properties to the entire file. So all the slides inside that file will have that same metadata assigned. But using TeamSlide to tag your data as the opposite, you can tag specific slides and have them in the TeamSlide UI to quickly find those specific slides, like who we are, what we do. Even these slides are in like a big deck with multiple slides that already have different metadata associated. You can have this specific metadata for those specific slides, like Kartik is going to show right here.
Yeah, so we talked about the metadata in SharePoint. The custom columns I had were industry, quality, and service line, and you can see them being pulled here. So I made industry browsable, so I can see that right on my main interface. I can click on it, see my energy slides, and pop any of these into my presentation. Or for the other properties, I've decided I don't want them to be browsable, but I do want them to be filterable. And so I can open up the filter at any point, and now I can filter by industry, but also by quality and by service line. We haven't configured the new department one, but if we had configured that, it would show up here. And now I can narrow in on what I'm looking for using the filters. The filters also include your standard properties that come from SharePoint, date modified, file name, and then we have extra ones on top of that, like what type of content is on the slide. So if it has a bar chart or a picture, you can narrow in like that. What layout it uses in PowerPoint, what library it came from. So you can configure as many filters as you like. You can order them from most important to least important, and it really helps you narrow in on what you might be looking for. What Ian was talking earlier about tags is SharePoint tags are applied to the entire file because SharePoint organizes your content in files. If that is not sufficient, maybe for your 50 highest used slides that are used all the time, it's worth calling those out individually. You can tag content in TeamSlide directly. Maybe we'll have a separate workshop on that. But for your best slides that are used all the time, you can tag those individually in TeamSlide so people can find that too.
We do have a question about this. Do people need to name each slide in the individual PowerPoint deck in order for it to pick up that slide name when they do a search, or is the search filter crawling the content on the slide?
So we are searching all the content on the slide. So at the base level, we're looking at all the content on the slide, what's in your notes, what's in charts, all of that. Any words on the slide are all indexed. We prioritize some places more than others. So if it's in the title of the slide, that's weighted a little bit more than the body of the slide to help drive that. So that's the first tier of search. The next tier is metadata that's coming from SharePoint or tags that you've put in yourself, or some automated ones like file name and folder. And then lastly, we're also detecting what's on the slide, a chart or image, allowing you to filter what's on there. So I would say metadata is a nice to have. It's not needed. Because we're definitely indexing all the content on the slides, and that's what helps them find what they're looking for.
Yeah, great. Thank you. While you have PowerPoint up, could you actually show the version control feature as well?
Sure. What version control does is it ensures that you are always presenting the latest and greatest slide, and you never have an old slide in your deck. Again, in the SharePoint context, as we sync with SharePoint, the latest material appears here. And so I was working on this deck last week, synced with SharePoint, and I pulled in this slide, which was feedback from consulting firms that use TeamSlide. Maybe Heather's prepared that. She helps run marketing. And that time, this was the latest and greatest. I've come back to this deck. I've saved this deck on my hard drive. I shouldn't, but I have this bad habit of doing that, or it's my secret Dropbox account, and I keep coming back to this deck and presenting it over and over. But in the meantime, over the last week, that slide's been updated. We gathered new data. Marketing has changed that slide. When I open up the deck, when I open up TeamSlide, it will check the slides against the repository and version control will pop up. I closed it, that's why you're not seeing it now, but I can force a run right here.
Oh, Kartik, I think you're not sharing the screen.
Oh, I'm not sharing my screen this whole time. Let me go back. Real quick, this was that marketing slide I was talking about with the data that I pulled in last week. I pulled up this deck from my hard drive, and I have a bad habit of doing that. Since last week, the slide has been updated. Version control ran automatically. You may have seen it, but I'll run it manually here. And it scans through my slides to find the ones that are out of date. And I can view the new slide. I can compare and contrast. And if I decide I want it, I can hit update now, or I can skip. I can skip this version. I can break the link so it never bothers me again. I can insert a copy so I can really take a closer look, but I'll hit update now and you'll see it swap automatically. So sorry, long-winded answer, but hopefully that provides some context on how version control works. Happy to answer any follow-up questions.
Kartik, when you shared your screen, and it defaulted to that browse by industry, sort of view, right?
Yeah, right.
We've got, those are properties, or how does, I just am unsure what the setup process looks like to get that to be something viewable. Like, for example, our master deck is 300 slides, and each of the deck is separated into sections like our customers or support and IT services, et cetera, et cetera. If I wanted to essentially make it to where because our sellers are used to kind of like navigating the master deck by sections, and if I wanted to, right now we only have it to where they just can either search for a slide or they can download a copy of the master deck from the template file, but I want them to be able to like browse it without having to download a copy. And I like this browse by industry. I would probably do it as browse by section. How do we set that up for them to do that?
So you have a couple of options. The first option is to break that deck up into the sections and save each section separately and use SharePoint column to call out each section. I'm guessing that's not the best situation because your sellers are used to having that master deck as a whole and you don't want to split it up. But if you could, that's one option. If you don't want to split it up, what you can do is use TeamSlide properties to label the sections. And let me try and show you that. So TeamSlide has a default property called tags. You can use the default property and so you can come to the edit content. You can run a search. And you can first of all do an advanced search to dive in on that exact deck with 300 slides that you want. But once you find that, you can come in and then you can add tags here.
Got it.
So that's That will work for 99% of, I guess, our customers to use the tags feature.
Uh-huh.
If you don't want to use tags, or if you want to really call it section, or you want multiple tags of different types, you can create just a property, but don't link that property to SharePoint. Just create any property you want. Let me see. Let's do this section. It's going to be a list value because you'll have a set of options. It'll be at an object level or slide level. I want to show this in the browsing bar and show it on the main page. Now, when I come to edit content, I can search for content here. Instead of using tags, I can go to, I don't think I've got the rights, but you can set properties here, and then you can set that section property in a similar fashion as tags, and it'll show up.
Awesome. Okay, great.
I'll shoot you a note after so we can find some time, but I think your sellers would really enjoy having it split up so that they can see it here easily, because I think otherwise it's like a blank slide effect or blank search effect. They don't know where to start.
Right.
Because
And they're used to, you know, they're used to searching for stuff they need, but it would just be easier to have the other way. So that's great. Thank you so much. I think I'm going to pursue the tag strategy.
Great. So you can see the section. I just tagged those 2 slides as a section, so they showed up here automatically. As you set it up and add tags, you can get it to show up. Switch over.
Yeah, and how does that show? Is it a board or?
No, so it should be on the search board. It won't show on the files board because the files board is like a folder view. So if you have it connected to the search board, and then if you go to tags here or properties built in, you can say show tags on main page, and it will show up without having to click on anything. Otherwise, you have to click on tags to see your tags. If you turn on that setting, you don't even have to click on tags. It'll just show you the sections right here.
Got it. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much.
I had one question.
Yeah.
Does it on the TeamSlide PowerPoint add-in, if we've got certain company standard slide templates that everybody uses in various pitch decks, but they might need to add or edit tiny little parts of them in order to match them for the client. So the standard 99% of the statement, then 1% needs to be updated. Does it recognize if I go there and I find the standard and I want to use the button of find the latest version or the version control thing, can it recognize it if it's in another deck that's been uploaded separately into the system instead of recognizing that this particular deck hasn't updated it because it won't have the standard deck remains exactly as it is? It will be edited in another deck that will be uploaded into SharePoint.
Yeah, sure. So what we do when you pull a slide using TeamSlide is we insert kind of like a marker or like a pixel into the slide into the copy of the slide that you insert into your presentation. If you save that presentation into your hard drive or anywhere that you save it, the next time that you open that presentation, can be in a week or a month or so, you will receive a notification saying, hey, the master slide that is in SharePoint, the source, was updated in case that there was an update there. So that's the main. So that's how basically the version control works. I don't know if that answered.
So it sort of does. It basically means that it will only tell us if it is in the company-wide template that we have has an edit. Then you can find that, but it can't recognize. It can't go from one deck and go into another one and see this has been used recently in another deck, but with slight edits.
Yeah, kind of. Like I think like in terms of like how it works is like you have the master in SharePoint, which is your single source of truth. So the version control is basically checking against that master.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I think we're finished today. We really appreciate you guys joining and hope this was helpful.
Thanks, everyone.